How many of you have had to work with a very difficult boss, or perhaps participate on a team with a challenging coworker, or maybe even be in an organization that had a very difficult culture, very difficult corporate expectations and norms? I know I've been in each of those myself more than once, and some of these environments can really pose challenges. They are difficult, dysfunctional work environments. That's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Dr. Jeff Comer. I am a doctor of psychology, and I've been a hospital CEO for well over 20 years. A lot of my career has been actually focused on going into hospitals that were about to fail, hospitals that were struggling either financially or from a quality standpoint. There was something wrong with them. And I can tell you, in all of these hospitals that I've done turnarounds at, every single one of them had a difficult or dysfunctional work environment. So it's a very, very problematic situation for an organization and for you as an individual living through it. Now, in all my experience, I have found that there are four factors, what I call four factors, that you need to consider when you're dealing with a difficult work environment to kind of figure out what's going on, what's the scenario, and what do I need to do about it most importantly. Those four factors are first, severity, scope, clarity, and control. Now we're going to talk about each one of those factors, but let me put a quick footnote. This is a really tough topic. I've struggled with this one. With all the videos I do and all the speaking I do, I've kind of struggled with this because I'm trying in 15, 20, 25 minutes to cover a subject that people get entire doctoral degrees in. There's just no way I can cover all aspects. So what I'm going to do is give kind of the key things that I've found in my very unique experience, and those can help you in dealing with a difficult work environment. And we'll talk a little bit more about, again, what you need to do to get through these tough environments. So let's start with a very, I guess, simple example, one that many of us have encountered. I've certainly been in this situation before. But let's pretend you've got a director of a department at a hospital. This could be a director over anything, radiology, the ICU, the ER, medical records, any department in the hospital. This person is reporting to a vice president. Now at a larger hospital, that's a pretty typical reporting structure. Now, let's say that this director feels that, we'll call it a she, that she is doing a really good job, that she's performing well, she has good rapport with her colleagues. If she's in a clinical area, she's got good patient satisfaction, good quality measures, hitting the expectations that she should be hitting. So she feels she's doing a good job. Now, she has a vice president she reports to that is micromanaging her, is nagging at her, nitpicking, constantly correcting her, doesn't seem to embrace her, does not include her in certain meetings she feels she should be in. Is this a terrible, toxic work environment? No, it's not. Not in this particular circumstance, not for this example. I mean, it could be, but for this example, it's not this horrible, toxic work environment. It's just a very frustrating, demeaning almost situation for this director. So what I want to do is I want to go through these four factors with that example in mind, and let's kind of talk through how you would look at them. So the first one is severity. Now, severity could be, it's a range, it's a continuum. So you could have at this end of the continuum just kind of minor personality differences taking place. Something that is not pleasant, but it's not the end of the world. It's not something that's going to make you leave an organization. At the other extreme, you've got a horrible, toxic environment. You've got all these just terrible behaviors that have led to a really unpleasant, hostile situation, okay? And then you've got everything in between. Now, with this particular example, again, I don't think this is a toxic work environment. It's not a hostile work environment. You've just got an employee who is not gelling with this manager, and for whatever reasons, it's really frustrating to her. For whatever reasons why this is happening, we don't know. But it's a situation that's not good. I'm not saying it's a good situation, but it's probably not the end of the world. It's not something she's going to leave the organization for. So in terms of severity, it's definitely not on the high end of severity, but it's kind of more into the lower end of the severity scale. Now, I want to make one note here, because a lot of the people that watch my videos, you are either current CEOs or you are aspiring CEOs. A lot of times you have to deal with these situations. Leadership jobs, particularly CEO jobs, are very, very difficult, challenging jobs. And a lot of times you're paid the higher salary dollars to deal with the people issues, the cultural issues. Those are the more difficult ones to deal with and change. So sometimes as a CEO, you're going to be faced with these kind of situations. And again, these 4 factors can help you to also work through them, even if you're not the person experiencing these considerations, okay? So let's go to the next one, which is scope. Now, scope could also be called maybe scale, and that's looking at how many people are involved in this difficult situation. Is it one person, or is it the entire corporate culture that's causing the dysfunctional environment? In this situation, it is the one vice president. We're going to assume that this is not a corporate culture of micromanagement. And there are companies that micromanage across the board. But let's just say in this circumstance, you've evaluated that. Nope, the company is not micromanagement oriented, but this particular VP is. So you've got to figure out, when you're looking at these situations, how broad is the scope of the circumstance, because that can change your options and how you deal with it. So the third factor we're going to look at now is the clarity, and this is typically the most difficult one. This is whether the situation is black and white or there's some gray spaces, okay? Black and white, it's illegal, it's unethical, it's sexual harassment, those types of things that there's no question, there's no two sides to the story. Somebody did something that was extremely inappropriate, crossed over that line. That is a very bad situation, of course. That is the hostile work environment. That is the toxic environment. Now, in this particular situation, it is a gray area. And the reason I say that, although this director is very uncomfortable, is frustrated, doesn't like the situation, we don't know what's going on with the vice president. This vice president, for example, may have performance concerns. He may think that this director is not doing a good job, is not meeting expectations, and he's micromanaging her because he's dissatisfied with her performance. Now, I'm going to say that is terrible management no matter what. You never micromanage somebody. Micromanaging a person makes the situation worse. If you've got somebody who's not performing, you want to deal with the performance issues. Talk to the person about it, mentor them, coach them, give them the tools they need, and hold them accountable to get the job done. But when you start micromanaging them, that just gets them bitter, them frustrated, you're now frustrated, and the performance tends to deteriorate. So even though this VP in this particular situation may think that he's got a valid reason to micromanage, it's still bad management. Also, this guy just may be a bad manager. This just may be how he manages. He doesn't know how to manage. He's never been mentored. He's never learned how to. Maybe his personality is such that he doesn't trust people and he feels he has to micromanage the world. We don't know in this particular circumstance. So the clarity of this situation, I would say it's definitely a gray area. There will be two sides to each story, and that's important for you to know when you're looking at your options, which again, we'll come back to in a second. Now, the final factor that I like to look at is what is the level of control? Does this director have a lot of control over the situation, or does she have no control over the situation? In this particular case, she might have a little bit of control. If she's been there for 5 or 6 years, has a good rapport in the organization, has always had good performance evaluations, maybe she's known this manager for several years and she actually likes the guy. She thinks he's a nice enough guy. There's just something not meshing with him. That might be a circumstance where she can take control, reach out to her vice president and talk to him about it. It could be a whole different situation. If it's more on that toxic scale, and I know we're saying it's not in this circumstance, but if it was more on the toxic scale, maybe she has no ability to go to that manager. If she goes to that manager, she knows it's going to be even worse for her. There'll be, retribution, or he'll become more difficult to work with. So maybe she has to go to HR. Maybe she has to go somewhere else. Again, understanding what you have control over and what you don't have control over is so important in these circumstances. And in fact, just as a psychologist, if people really took the time to sift through what they have control over versus what they don't, psychological health would be dramatically better. We tend to spend too much time focusing on things we have zero control over. That causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of stress, and a lot of psychological problems. So again, the fourth factor, focus on what you have control over. Let the other things go. Okay, so I hope that example gives a little bit of a kind of a feeling for how I would go through these 4 factors and analyze them, gathering my information so that I can make a good decision. Now, we're going to talk about what to do, but what's more important is what not to do, because there are a lot of things in these situations, regardless of the severity, that you do not want to do, and I want to go through those with you right now. First of all, Generation Zers, younger millennials, Most of you guys were kind of born with the cell phone in your hand with social media. That's all you know. Guys, do not ever, ever, ever go to social media over your hostile or difficult or frustrating work environment. I don't care where it is on the severity scale. Going to social media and blasting your company is a terrible, terrible idea. That will backfire on you. Please do not do that. I cannot stress that enough to you. That is not an appropriate response. That is an unprofessional response, and it shows an immature manager in you. Deal with this professionally. Deal with this in the right ways. Don't go out to social media and bash your company. That's a bad idea. And I guess along those lines, don't badmouth anybody. And that's one thing that is really important to learn. As human beings, from a psychological perspective, we have what's called the negativity bias. Again, it gets back to evolutionary psychology. I won't go into that too much right now. But we have a focus, a need psychologically to look at negative things. We look at negative things far more than positive things. So when you're in a work situation, you're with your coworkers, and you've got this bad situation taking place with your vice president, the tendency is to want to share that with your coworkers, to badmouth your vice president, to try to get each other to bond. You want that person to badmouth them, and then now you're in this gripe session. That is never a good situation. That can also come back to bite you. Keep in mind, if somebody comes into your office repeatedly and badmouths other people, they will also badmouth you, okay? So be very careful. There's no reason in the work setting to talk negatively about other people. That brings down the whole culture. It contributes more negativity, and you kind of fall into a habituated pattern that really goes down the same line as the person that's causing the problem to start with. So you don't want to sink to their level with negativity. Keep it positive and deal with this professionally and proactively, okay? Make sense? The other thing I want to stress, do not stop working. Do not stop performing. Now is the time to step up your performance. Reason for that, if you're dealing with a really difficult boss, for example, who's a negative boss, bad boss, whatever they're doing to you, I can almost guarantee you that person is documenting, that person is covering him or herself. If you're getting ready to go to HR to complain about that boss, what will likely happen is you'll go to HR, complain about that boss, and that boss will have his list of concerns about you. So if you have stopped performing, if you've slacked off on your job because you're frustrated, you're burned out, trust me, I get it. I understand why you do that. I would want to too, and I probably have at times when I've been in these situations. That is the natural human tendency. You don't want to work hard for this person that's treating you poorly, but you're giving that person things to flip back at you and take the heat off of him or her. Keep your performance going. Keep performing to your expectations. Then when you go to HR, that boss has nothing to come back and point your direction. The finger pointing stays directly on that person to deal with the situation. I kind of mentioned earlier, not taking things out on others. Very, very important. Don't get snippy with your coworkers. Don't get snippy at home. That doesn't help anything. I know you want to, release frustrations and vent, but that doesn't cure anything. That just makes things worse. So, keep everything as positive as you can. And finally, do not neglect taking care of yourself. Self-care, stress management techniques, way beyond the scope of this discussion today, but they're really important for you to focus on. Take care of yourself. Really up your self-care, up your stress management techniques. Now is the time to keep yourself as calm and focused as you can. So those are the things not to do. Now you're wondering, what do we do? So first thing, and you're going to say this is like a duh statement, do something. Burnout does not go away, okay? Stress does not go away. Bad work situations do not get better on their own. They typically get worse. So you've got to take control with what you have control over and do something, okay? Very, very important for you. And we'll come back to the somethings in a second. The other thing is to rise above it. Don't become emotional. It's hard. Trust me, I know, particularly if you're dealing with something like sexual harassment or hostile work environments, you're going to have emotions. Perfectly understandable. But when you're putting your argument together, when you're putting your documentation together, when you're going to HR, for example, or where you're talking to your boss or whatever steps you're taking, it's much, much more effective to get your message across in a logical and a calm manner. The emotions don't help in that situation, but you are going to feel emotions. I do understand that, but try to keep the focus on being calm, reasonable, and kind of fact-driven. That will get you much, much better results. Always keep in mind, as a leader, again, this video is geared towards leaders, towards CEOs, COOs, directors, VPs. You're there to do what's best for your organization. Always keep that in mind. It may be best for you with a difficult situation at work to just kind of roll over and play dead and ignore it. And maybe that is an option. Sometimes it is. But if it's detrimental to the organization, I would challenge you to rise above, doing what's, best for you and do what's best for the organization. It's always a balancing act, but that's really what you're there to do. And these jobs are not easy, and you do have to do what's best for the people in the organization and make sure that you are making sure that everything is running in an ethical manner, a legal manner, and to the values and the culture of the organization. This is really an important one. You must have in these situations specific documentation. Okay, do not just go to HR and say, "Oh, my boss is a jerk." That's going to get you nowhere. And maybe your boss is the biggest jerk in the world. He probably is, but don't go do. That's not going to help you. Okay, that HR director will say, "Well, what did he do? I want specifics. I want dates. I want times. I want what was said. Who witnessed it? Are there emails?" All these things. You need to have your case. No matter where you are on that severity spectrum, whether it's hostile work environment to just kind of a frustrating environment, make sure you got your documentation in place. That will give you the facts that you need. It will present it in a logical way. And then your boss can't argue that. If you've got 15 facts of where he was abusive to you and dates and times and what was said, it's really difficult for him to refute that and to point the fingers back on you. But if you just say, "My boss is a jerk, I don't like him," that doesn't mean much, and your boss can easily refute that, and HR is not going to take that seriously either. So again, keep your documentation and really keep very specific documentation. That's really an important concept. It's hard to do, though. You get so busy, you don't want to take the time to do it. I know, but it is important to try to do that. I would also say to get assistance. These are really difficult issues, these gray area issues, in that clarity continuum when they're gray, they're not black and white. Again, there's multiple sides to any story, and it can be hard to sort through these, particularly when you've got your emotions going. And it can be very valuable to get help. Get somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who's at your same level or above. They've encountered this before. You can even go to a formal career coach. I would suggest if you're doing career coaching, make sure the coach actually knows what they're doing. Anybody can call themselves a coach. If you're a CEO and you're dealing with a really complicated hostile work situation, get an executive coach who has been a CEO before. Don't get somebody who's never been a CEO. They cannot help you. Also look at the educational background of these coaches. There's no educational standards. Make sure you've got somebody that has the experience, the education, and the ability to help you navigate through this. That is very important, but do reach out. It can even be reaching out to a mentor of yours or a colleague, somebody who's, a CEO at another organization. Run it by that person. Try to get as much neutral, non-biased feedback as you can to help deal with some of these situations. That can really help you as well. Always consider the ramifications of what you're doing. If you are a CEO and you bring legal issues to a licensing board or to the Joint Commission or to any other regulatory agency, just realize you've got to now deal with your board, and you should never do those things without going through your board, as a side note. But if you do have to take those types of actions, there will likely be media coverage. This day and age, the media coverage does not go away. It is with you the rest of your career. With one Google search, anything that's been reported in the media about you, good, bad, indifferent, right, wrong, true, not true, it follows you for life. And it can be very difficult to overcome some of those things. So you need to think about the ramifications on your career, on you as a person, on your family, as you're dealing with some of these more difficult situations. So as you're going through all of this, looking at these 4 factors, you're filtering these factors through your personal values, your goals, your norms, your cultural beliefs, and then you can start to look at your options. And it's really tough to go over options right now because there's a million different scenarios we could portray. And so you have to go through these 4 factors, run them through your value system, and then look at the options you've got. And that's where using a coach or a mentor or a colleague can really help you to brainstorm those options. But they could range where you don't do anything. You just say, that's not that big of a deal. This is a coworker that kind of irritates me a little bit in meetings, and I'll just deal with it. But it could be the other end of the spectrum where you're being severely sexually harassed. How do you handle that? What's the best approach to deal with that? Most of the times they're somewhere in the middle of that gray spectrum. And again, there's all kinds of options. You don't do anything. You talk to your supervisor if that's the problem. You talk to the coworker if that's the problem. You go to the HR department. You go to, if you're a CEO, your board members. You switch to another department if you're a department manager. You maybe have to file a report if there's unethical or illegal activities that are taking place. You leave altogether. Again, there's all kinds of different options you can take, and many, many more than those. But the important thing is that you You're looking at the situation logically, as emotional free as you can. I know I'm a psychologist. I know how hard that can be. Keep your documentation. Make sure you understand there are often two sides to every story, not with some things. I mean, sexual harassment, illegal activities, obviously, no two sides to that. But a lot of the gray space there will be. And make sure that you're thinking about what's best for the organization, what's best for you and your family. These are really complicated situations. I said earlier, I can't cover everything in a 20-minute video. I want to give you kind of a high-level overview of some of the things that I have found in my 20 plus years of being a CEO and dealing with these issues all the time. You will, as a CEO, deal with these many, many times, and you'll get to where you're very comfortable dealing with these situations, and you'll have kind of a process down and know how to deal with them. But it can be really difficult, particularly earlier in your career. So I hope this is helpful to you guys. And as always, please send your comments and your feedback, and I will have another video out soon.